so that this will be saved in for posterity. We'll post it on our YouTube channel, and maybe you're watching it right now. Uh-oh, we're time traveling. Okay, before I confuse myself, I'm going to formally say Warwick's is pleased to host Meghan Tady as she discusses her debut novel, Super Bloom, in conversation with Meghan Riordan Jarvis. And Meghan Tady is a writer and editor who runs the company Wordlift. When she's not scrutinizing copy, she can be found stalking her free neighborhood library, like a little free library, right?
Yes,
Awesome.
yes, yeah.
Beautiful.
And kind of also stalking it, like who's taking it, who's taking what.
Okay, oh, wordplay.
Yeah.
Okay, also challenging anyone to a dance-off or stewing over how Portlandia stole all her jokes.
Mm-hmm.
She's hard at work on her next novel already, Champions for Breakfast. Is that a play off of Vonnegut?
Breakfast no, but yes, but no.
Okay.
Yes.
Which will also be published by Zibby Books. I want to hear more about that later. She's a corn-fed Nebraska gal who now lives in a quaint New England town with her husband and 2 children. And she will discuss Super Bloom with Meghan Riordan Jarvis, who is a podcast host. Podcast is entitled Grief is My Side Hustle, which is like brilliant. She is a 2-time TEDx speaker and a psychotherapist specializing in trauma and grief and loss. After experiencing PTSD following the deaths of both of her parents, Jarvis founded Talking Points Partners to help employers address complex emotions such as grief in the workplace, which is so necessary. Thank you for doing that. Jarvis is currently at work on Can Anyone Tell Me Why? 25 Essential Questions About Grief and Loss, which publishes with Sound True Media in 2024. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Originally from New England, Jarvis currently lives in Maryland with her husband and their 3 children, where competing piles of Legos and books cover most surfaces of their house, as long as the Legos aren't on the ground, because that is truly the most painful thing to step on.
They are true facts. These are true facts.
Before I leave the screen, for those watching live, please do remember to use the Facebook comments to submit questions for Meghan Squared. And after they are done with their conversation, I'll pop back on screen and convey those questions. So without further ado, Meghan Tady in conversation with Meghan Riordan Jarvis.
Thank you. That was great.
We did it.
You guys have great bios. So
it's over. Easy. Fantastic.
It's over. Can I also say that your upcoming memoir is coming out on Zibby Books with the same publisher, which is how we know each other.
That's right. I sent them the bio that I normally send the Zibby Books people, which excludes my Zibby Books book. But yes, End of the Hour comes out in December. Yeah. So that is how we have fallen in love with each other, is we get to know each other through our publisher, which is so fun and exciting.
It's so fun. You're now my other favorite Meghan besides myself.
I love that. I love that self-love comes first. Let's thank Warwick as being a independent bookstore. We love all authors love independent bookstores. And most of us loved independent bookstores before we became authors. So
it's true.
Thank you for having us and hosting us. And I am so excited to dive in to talk about your book because I love this book so much. Yes. And I am just going to treat this like my personal 1-hour private conversation with you about this book and how you made this book happen.
Okay, let's do it.
All right, let's do it. Okay, so do you want to just give a general plot for folks so that we know what we're dealing with here?
Great idea. Super Bloom is about a massage therapist named Joan Johnston who's grieving the loss of her love, Samuel, and she's about to get fired from her job at a spa in Vermont. And she's got one chance to save her job, which is to get a glowing review from basically the world's most demanding massage client, famous romance novelist Carmen Bronze. Carmen swoops into town, massage goes haywire, and basically Carmen is sort of backs Joan in a corner and it says, like, give me all the dirt about this spa. I want to set my next bestseller here. Along the way, Joan begins to wonder if she should be the one to write that love story. And chaos ensues. Dun, dun, dun.
Sure does. Good chaos. So I want to ask you 1,000 questions, but I'm going to start with the characters. So you have spoken, it's in lots of places that the idea for this book came from a trip you took. So can you just give us a little like nugget of that so that people will ask that, people who ask that inevitable question, let's put them out of their misery. How did you decide this is what you wanted to write?
So my husband took me on a surprise trip to a spa in Vermont. I live in Western Massachusetts. I had been dabbling with fiction. I have a journalism background, but I hadn't thought of myself as a novelist yet. And I was getting a massage, and it was not a good one, when it's like a really good one and you just don't want it to end. This was not that. Mostly because I could tell the woman was sort of like, oh God, I don't want to be here. And my face was in the face cradle. And the whole time I'm thinking, what is her story? Am I her fifth massage of the day? Does she even like it here? Does she like this job? Do her hands hurt? Because I have a journalism background, I've interviewed hundreds of people, and I always like interviewing people that I've just met, and I want to hear their stories. So all these questions are ticking through my brain. And I walked out of there, not with a great massage, but with this novel idea flowing through my head and sort of casting her. It felt too awkward to ask her all these questions.
Yeah.
But I began to sort of cast her as this woman. Okay, she's brokenhearted. Oh, this isn't the job that she really wants. She doesn't love the spa rules here. What are the, and I began to just cast this sort of woman that readers meet in the very beginning of the book. She's sort of at the bottom of the barrel, and she's kind of at the worst time of her life. And we build up from there.
Yes.
Yeah.
What I find so interesting about Joan is that she's in a profession that most people fall in love with, right? Like most people who choose massage would say it was some form of a calling. It wasn't like they ran the numbers and thought, this is the way I'm going to pay for my kids' college. Generally, they have come to it because they've had their own positive experience with body work, but that is not her story. So
Right.
can you, and she has a dear friend, Cher, who that is her story. So can you just talk a little bit about like that choice for the background of the character, like as a mechanism of what you are explaining, what are you letting us know that like really she doesn't belong here?
Well, I think I wanted to write a character who was up against a lot of things. And one of them is, economic pressures. And she comes from a family where no one's gone to college, and going to college is a huge financial feat. And she tries it, and that financial strain is too much for her and her family. And so it's not a given. So she begins to look for other jobs that kind of give this like living wage, and isn't finding a lot. Yeah. And she sees her friend Cher, who loves massage therapy, and the point of entry is much cheaper than college, but it's still a chunk of change for someone who doesn't have a lot. And for most Americans, it's $8,000 for her. It changes state to state, and school to school. So she sort of sees the freedom that her friend Cher has. Cher now runs her own home massage business, and thinks, oh, I think I love that idea of this freedom. Maybe this could be me. Maybe this would give me a life with a living wage. I could afford my own place, and I wouldn't be working at the bowling alley like I've been doing for 3 years. She wants a career, and she wants to love it. And there are aspects of it that she does love. When I interviewed body workers, I actually found that some people are driven to this profession not just out of like a love for it. Some of them are actors who are like trying to get in on CSI, but like need to pay their rent on a steady way. Yeah. Or, some of them are kind of fall in love with it and then start to do it and find out that their bodies won't comply. You know, the problem with that profession is your earning potential is sort of capped at what your body can handle, even if you're at the highest paid amount. And 4 or 5 massages a day is quite a bit. And it's a lot for some people's bodies to do over a long period of time.
Right.
So sometimes people make the investment and they get into it and they're just like, oh, this is not what I thought. Or they end up working at spas or franchises where the base pay, there is no base pay, their rate that they're earning is not much. So I wanted to show Joan trying to come up with a different plan for her life. It not matching that sort of passion, but needing something. And ultimately it not agreeing with her for multiple reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them is also heartbreak, because she thought she was going to be there with the love of her life, who she meets in massage school. And he dies 6 months into their courtship, which is heartbreaking for Joan. I'm sorry, Joan, that I did that to you.
It's such an important addition to the plot, but it, to me, part of what you're showing us in that section where, you know, you sort of unfold that there is this heartbreak. For many people who've had a heartbreak, there was the before of the life that they had, that they understood, that was exciting, or at least had hope and potential. And then it breaks. That's where the heart breaks. And so I think part of what Super Bloom is giving us is this space of like, she's stuck.
Yeah.
But she has some people around her who see her potential.
Yeah.
And others who don't, who are sort of comic in that way. And the most unlikely unlocker of this potential is Carmen Bronze.
Right.
Who in her own right is, you know, in a field, again, that we sort of like to believe as a writer, we like to believe that that's a calling and that people are doing it. And she sort of is able to do the opposite of a massage therapist. A massage therapist, the limit is how many bodies can you touch in a day.
Right.
A book can be purchased by millions of people and you get to touch people in a different sort of way. But can you talk a little bit about Carmen and where the idea for Carmen came from? And I heard you sort of talk about, like, we cast Joan in your mind first.
Yes.
But Carmen is such an amazing, unexpected foil. Can you just talk about that character?
Yeah. So, you know, in a way, I sort of felt like I was Carmen a little bit when I was leaving that massage room for real, when I wanted to pull this woman aside and say, tell me everything about this place. Tell me what it's like to be here. And I wanted to, like, even be like, can I meet you for breakfast tomorrow? And in that sort of excitement to sort of just like, I don't know, vacuum up all of her knowledge, I was like, oh, maybe it's a novelist that wants that information. It was already becoming sort of meta for me as I was thinking about it. And I was like, well, maybe she's really, you know, she's published 34 books and she's at the top of her game. And in the very beginning, I have to admit that I cast her as a romance novelist as a lark, you know, kind of poking fun at the genre. And it had been years since I had read any romance. And I just thought this will be so hilarious. Romance is so funny. But I realized I needed to read recent romance. I needed to listen to podcasts from romance, you know, writers and kind of steep myself in that world. And I found, much to my happy surprise, that romance has become so much more feminist and interesting and innovative. And I was really enjoying reading it and finding myself swept up in these stories, finding how hard it was to write them. And I gained a whole new respect. And then I had to really rethink her and make sure that I gave her that respect, even as we had fun with the genre. Mm-hmm. She definitely represents the ego side of writing, and mm-hmm. Joan represents the self-consciousness, both of which were sort of duking it out in me as I was sort of like, do I have this ability to write a novel? Who am I to do this? and moments where I'm like, of course I do. I'm the best writer ever. And then moments where I'm like, of course I don't. I'm the worst writer ever. So they're the kind of like the opposites of each other. One of the best edits that my editor, Bridie Lavero, gave me at Zibby Books was to give Carmen Braun's more of a story arc that mirrors Joan's, so that there is this cast of characters that sort of stand around and support Joan. And without giving too much away, she was sort of like, I want to see Carmen in and among that circle at the end. And I want to see them have a journey that's more intertwined rather than just confrontational, and see them that they do different things for each other. And it was such an important edit. And I think for a lot of the book, they're just kind of paralleling each other. She's goading her, and it was fine, but it wasn't where it needed to be. And I'm so grateful she said that. And once she did, it all clicked. And I hope readers love her as much as I do, even though she can be really tricky to love sometimes.
I think that's a perfect description of her. And again, it does occur to me that she's the one that offers Joan the opportunity to get unstuck, even though, and we won't give too much away, it does feel a little bit like a deal with the devil in the moment, right? It feels like something that she says yes to out of desperation, but you kind of get a different sense of what she's desperate for, right? Like there's a stuckness that is not her fault. And, you know, you have some great lines in there about she has some difficulty with her friendship with her best friend, because part of what happens in there, which, you know, grief is my all day, everyday conversation, but you do such a beautiful job of validating that friendships really they take a beating when someone goes through a profound loss that the other person has no way of understanding.
Yes, exactly. I wanted to show that. I wanted to show that Cher is well-meaning. She's worried about her friend, and she sees her friend is stuck, and she's trying to be like, get it together. Like, come on, hard love here. Like, what is your problem? You've got a good life in a lot of ways. And in some ways that is true. And so I wanted to show that side, but also show that grief comes in many forms. And Joan and Samuel's love story was going to be epic. You know, they are these quirky characters. They found each other. They were so pumped. They can see the whole world, you know, kind of unfurling. And new love is so precious. You can never repeat it. They've got all those emotions swirling around. It feels so precious. They don't want to let anyone in. And then when Samuel dies, only 6 months in, she's left holding the bag of all those emotions. And no one really knows her story. And she doesn't have a status. She's not a widow. She's not a fiance. She's not a girlfriend of many years. So there's a couple different whammies, you know, like loss of Samuel, loss of story, loss of status, loss of future. Like there's just so, and people don't get it. And when I kind of sat down to tinker with like, what kind of grief story am I giving her? Giving her a story of losing someone at the beginning of a love story then allowed me to tap into writing as a vehicle for moving through grief and telling the love story she lost. And it feels like it wouldn't have been the same if they had been together for many years. And, you know, there's a quirky cast of characters all around Joan, including Cher.
They're the best.
And, you know, writing a story where someone transforms over the shape of the story is tricky. You can't just be like, and now Joan's transforming. Watch her go. She's having a moment. Here's an aha moment. You have to show it gradually happening. And you sometimes do that by presenting her with different characters who give her growth opportunities, whether she's pushing back against something Cher says, or she's stepping up to a friendship moment with another character. So I knew I had to have different people bringing different things to her to sort of see that transformation kind of up and down along the way, if that makes sense.
It does. And I noticed you also did that with food, that she's eating,
Yeah.
which is very real. There are so many pieces in there that you're not instructing us or telling us what grief feels like, but you are showing a character who's being very real. And she doesn't, even though she works at this health spa and she's ostensibly meant to be taking care of people, she's like, I think in the first chapter, she's going to get fast food.
Yeah.
And then at some point towards the end, she's eating some kind of like amazing fresh pasta with Italian names. And
Right.
so you do there as sort of the craft of writing her, you give us you show us those small ways in which she is opening up, and which I think is, I want you to talk a little bit about the title, which I know you've talked about probably ad nauseum, but it's so interesting. But I think the word bloom, the idea that we slowly open, is such a like a beautiful concept. So will you tell folks what a super bloom is and how you learned about that and why it's relevant in the title?
Yes. And thank you for picking up on the food thing. I
Loved it.
I love food, and I really live in fear of missing a meal or a snack. And I'm always, whenever I read books or, watch a show, I'm always sort of concerned, like, when are they eating? Where's
the food?
Where's the food happening? And it's important. You learn a lot by what people are eating or what they're suppressing or what they wish they had, so I think that'll be something I always kind of weave into my work, because it's important to me, and I love it. So super bloom is a rare phenomena in nature where wildflower seeds lie dormant in deserts for years, and they are in the harshest conditions. It's so hot, they're so dry. And they're waiting for the right conditions to bloom. They're waiting for the right amount of heat and water. And when they bloom, which is happening now in California and elsewhere in Arizona, they are just so magnificent and so bountiful that you can see them from space. And they literally are stopping traffic. People are driving hours to see them. I had never heard of a super bloom until around 2019. This novel took me 8 years, from, face in the face cradle till about now. And I had a different title. It was called Big Inspiration. I think because I was looking for a big inspiration, and I felt stuck with the book. And I came home from grocery shopping, and I was in my kitchen, turned on NPR, just like, gotta love it. And along comes the story of a super bloom in California. And I was sort of like, what is that? And I was listening intently, and I raced upstairs. I typed it in, and all these images of these flowers came up, and I was reading about them. And I was just sort of like, wait a second. This feels like the metaphor for my novel, the through line I've been searching for. This idea that we all have potential sort of wound up inside of us, like these little seeds waiting to bloom, waiting for the right conditions to bloom. And it felt a little bit like what was happening even for me as I was sort of stepping into my power as a writer and claiming this my title for myself, which is something Joan begins to do. And I just was scribbling, and I remember I even called my husband, I got a new title, and I think this is it. And it all clicked. And the fact now that these super blooms have been happening as the book comes out has been just miraculous. In
the most. I want to ask about craft, but before I do that, because I love them so, can you talk to me about the reality of Joan's parents? So I'm gonna cheat and tell listeners that Joan's dad is like her personal cheerleader, that it feels to her a little bit like he's harping on this old idea that she had a long time ago, that she could be a writer. And why did he get stuck on this idea? But as the story begins to unfold, what we see is that he can see her even when she can't see herself. And so, and he's just sort of this delightful kind of dotty character who comes in and out. But the mom feels so real to me. She, you know, she's a woman of a certain age who is trying to care for her daughter, who's in a really tough spot. It's visible, you know, Joan can't hide it. She looks tired. She looks thin. And the mom is bringing like old trash cans from her house. And, you know, it's like a Yankee swap in Joan's house at all times. And I want to know about those ways of being loved and how you knew to write those. Are there people in your life that love that way? Have you seen those characters? I mean, it's just, they're so vivid to me. I feel in my mind, I can picture who I think they are.
Oh, that is so nice. You know, again, I'm going to credit my editor because the dad character was very flat on the page. And she, in her edit letter, there's sort of like, you know, various areas of opportunity.
Growth opportunities.
Yes. And one of them was the dad. And she was like, look, I think you either, you know, kill him, not, you know, pull him out,
right,
or you need to beef him up.
Okay.
And I was like, you know, I want to keep him. So what do I do with him? And I really had a long think about it and played with it for a little bit. And I realized that he would be the one of the people who could see that talent, wouldn't really drop it, but also, saw that gift in her and wanted to keep reminding her. And you know, and not doing it in a way that felt like you're not achieving anything great now. You know, he's not saying that to her at all. He's very proud of her in her day-to-day, but he wants her to know that he saw that talent and thinks she could still be doing it and find fulfillment in it. And I think that's all you know, in my mind, he's not thinking to be published, to do this, to be on the New York Times. So he's just thinking,
you could write about this, right? I mean, that's what he keeps saying to her, is like, this has legs, right? Like you could write about this, couldn't you?
Yes. And you know, it's their way of connection, you know, it's their way of connection, and it's his way of connecting. And when a lot of times I think other ways of connecting fail him, you know, where he's kind of coming over to check on you, but he doesn't really know what to say, but he knows enough to, I won't say much, but he knows enough to sort of continue to drop these little hints. And the mom character is just so, I love her so much. And my own mother-in-law brings us things all the time, from the treasure chest on the Cape, which share the Cape connection. And, you know, she's done this since I was engaged to my husband, and she is constantly pulling out. I mean, she drives around with like 12 wicker baskets in her back of her car. She's always got things. And sometimes you're sort of like, and other times it's, you know, the thing you needed. You don't know, how did you know I needed that? Or suddenly like people know that she does it and they're asking for those items. So I was sort of like, how do I embellish that? And I find the whole talking while texting and then getting those things wrong so hilarious. I receive a lot of those texts. I give a lot of those texts, and you like look back and you've accidentally said something kind of raunchy, and you just meant like, oh, can I pick up a bag of oranges? But you said something really nasty. So again, I think what I always am striving for in my work is not grabbing the low-hanging fruit, which means whether it's a metaphor that I'm sort of working hard for, or characters where I'm not just saying her mom and dad loved her, you know, they supported her all her life, but I'm showing it in different ways, and it's true to their personalities, and they're stepping up in those ways that are also really lend themselves to comedy, which is what I wanted to do. So
it's such a sharp, well, I love the parents. I mean, I love the characters. It's such, your writing is so sharp. I mean, I think it's hard to tell a sad story and I think it's hard to tell a sad story funny. And most of your sad story is very funny. And you have these very razor sharp, my favorite kind of writing, which is like no extra words, just only what you need. And then it lands and it's in your hand and you're like, oh my God, look at that phrase. I have said this publicly multiple times, but can you just read the first line of your book, which will go down? I mean, that we didn't know each other that well. And I got the book really early and I was like, oh, damn, she did it. Like there's no other better line to pull a reader in. So can you
I will.
I want to talk about craft a little.
You're amazing. Okay. I harbor a secret fantasy to go apeshit at work. Maybe today's the day.
We're probably going to get in trouble with the bookstore because I don't think we were supposed to swear, but already I really think that line is just setting up the desperation that you see your character in. And so from that line, I was like, what's happening with this woman? What's going on with her? So I want to talk to you about the craft of writing, because writing is not only, your passion, it's your real live day job. You edit, you have a company that writes, and I think you're contracted for 2 more books, right?
Just one.
Just one. Okay. But you're in the middle of writing another.
Yes.
So I want to know, how does it happen for you? Do you do I wake up by 9 o'clock, I'm sitting at my desk and I'm playing with words. Do you wake up at 5 a.m. and the words are in your head? Do you read Joan Didion and then you feel inspired? Like, have you kept, I mean, I know a writer who has like a notebook full of great lines that he's hoping to work into what does yours look like?
I read Joan Didion and then I feel insecure. No, I'm just kidding.
Yes. You're not helping anyone, Joan.
No. Every day is different. I have 2 little kids, they're 4 and 7, and I'm running my business, and I work 4 days a week, home with my son on Fridays. So everything is condensed in a small amount of time. And so there is no, like, I get up, I don't get up at 5. If I get up at 5, my kids get up at 5. They just know. Yeah. I tried it during the pandemic.
They heard your breathing change.
They did.
Yeah.
So I'm carving out time to write each day. And sometimes it's longer than other times based on other deadlines I have. And I like to write from the very beginning of the story on through. I know a lot of times people are like, oh, I thought of this scene and I wanted to write it. I sort of force myself to write it, beginning to end. I often pause and I like to perfect it as I go. I kind of can't leave loose things loose. I like it to be as strong as possible. Sometimes that slows me down. I think the thing that I need the most of that I don't get, and then I think emerging writers forget about, is time to think. Thinking time away from the computer to allow the characters to materialize, for the plot to really come together, for the plot holes, for you to figure them out. And I hike every day with my dog, and I often force myself to do that in silence so that I can think. And, I don't have a lot of other time to do that.
Yeah.
So I'm getting, like, oh, that's it. That's the thing I need. And I will write little notes on my phone as I go so that I can start there the next day. And then when I have a draft that's done, I will then, I'm not a plotter. I like to fly by the seat of my pants, even as I'm going chronologically or whatever. I will then make little note cards on a board, and sort of, then I can see each chapter and get a bird's eye view and like kind of look down at it and say, okay, what is making sense here? I love the editing process. It's, I know a lot of people hate it. I love it. And I will likely cry once I get the edit letter. It's hard to hear great things, but then also like, here's the work that's required. And then I also feel really emboldened. I like a challenge.
Encouraged.
and I want it to be the best it can be. So having someone come in and help me, poke holes in it and figure out where I can make it better that I can't see because I'm so in it. Yes, please. Like, I love that. So yeah, but I mean, the second book, I'm writing under contract for the first time. And, I'm still learning as I go. Each book might be different and I'm learning as I go.
But I like the answer, right? Because I think most of us, when we're asking questions about how do you go through the process to get to a product, it's kind of like asking, like, how do you get ready for bed? I just want to know what your routine is to see if that would make sense for me. Is there anything in there that would make sense for me? And I think you're offering a bit of hope by telling the truth, which is this book took 8 years, which sounds like an awfully long time to people who are wanting to publish a book, and totally realistic to those of us that have been in the process of writing a book. Books take an incredible amount of time to put out, on a bookshelf. And I appreciate what you're describing as sort of like your method, which you understand to be a little bit of, it's like tidying up the kitchen while you're cooking. The meal isn't done, but you want to make sure that, you put the flour and the sugar and that part of the counter is clean. And I think sometimes, there are writers out there that are like, no, you have to, blood, sweat, and tears and lock yourself away in the woods. And other people who say, like, no, you have to get up every morning and write 3 pages. And I think you and I would say it's all imperfect. It's all a learning process. However you're doing it right now may not be what it looks like later. I do really appreciate and know this to be true, that you do really trust your editor. And I think right, when you're an early writer and you're not, you're a journalist, you have a writing background, but when you are putting together a product and you can't see the forest for the trees,
right,
having someone, a trusted reader who says, first, I want you to know I love it. Second, the dad needs to be totally fleshed out or killed. That's a form of love, isn't it?
Yeah. And it feels so good. I mean, that was actually this whole process is, it's full of ups and downs, but one of, I would say, like, my highest moments was in the editing of the book. It was what I had been wanting for so long. And I finally had it and was collaborating with someone. And it was such a blast. I loved every second of it. So I'm looking forward to handing her the second novel in a couple of weeks and seeing, like, what do we do from here? The second book is, it's a dual POV, mom and daughter, alternating perspectives, alternating chapters. Never done that before, so each time, each project is going to be different. I want to challenge myself. Have I done it? I don't know. We shall see. But should we stop for questions? I don't know if we're supposed to,
I think they might pop in. Oh, there we
go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
That was great. We do have a question from Anissa for both authors. What did you learn about writing your debuts that you wish you knew before you started this writing journey?
Oh, do you want to answer that, Meg? I'll answer after.
I think I imagined that getting a book published was like breaking through the ribbon at the end of a marathon. And I was going to be like, yes, I've made it. And I was going to feel amazing. And I would be on this other side and the world was going to just be different. And it's also hard having a book out in the world. It's fraught with so many other different ups and downs. It's still riddled with rejection. It's still riddled with self-doubt. There's so many, and now, so I kind of imagined it would be like, I don't know, this, like, cue the We Are the Champions music, and but like, no, that's not it. And life also just goes on, and like, probably my neighbor hasn't even read it, so I'm not saying don't do it to people who are working, their butts off for this, but to also know that it's hard on the other side, and to prepare for the ups and downs of the publishing journey through the whole thing. It's also incredible, you know, and wonderful moments of connection with readers, and to sort of work on a plan and a practice. I think Courtney Mom in the book Before and After the Book Deal is like, look, after you get your book published, you're going to need some therapy. So I'm not saying go get therapy, but have a plan in place to be able to ride the middle, because it's rocky and exciting and ups and downs all along the way. And I imagine it will continue to be that way. So yeah.
A journey, not a destination.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah, I feel like Meghan just nailed it. And she and I sometimes have this side conversation with each other, like, oh my God, this is so hard in ways that we didn't expect. And I think a lot about like the process of writing. My book is a memoir, and my book, The End of the Hour, is my story of having PTSD, experiencing PTSD after my mom died, which is the very illness that I treat people for. So there's sort of a meta inside my story. And I began writing. There is writing in that book that was written from a human system that was still experiencing PTSD on a daily basis. So I think what I would say about, you know, what I wish I had known was that writing has to be a collaborative process. Because one of the things about writing a memoir, generally, I mean, I haven't read a memoir that isn't sort of on some level a story of loss. And you're telling your personal story, your unique and personal story. I have 5 brothers and sisters. They did not experience the death of my mother the way I did. So it's all alone together. That certainly from the Zibby Books team, you know, they loved my voice and they loved my story and they believed that I could tell it. And they gave me hard critical feedback. Like, Meg, I love to be edited. To me, that's like therapy. You go in and you say a mess of things, and then someone wiser and able to sort of move through says, oh, so you're trying to say this, do that in 1 sentence and not 12. And I learned a lot about myself as a writer, a relatively new writer, but I think I believed you are the writer, you go through the process and you create a product. And what I have discovered is that is never true. Sometimes my process, because I had editors that I loved, that I would throw myself in front of a train for, was wonderful. But I know authors who are fighting for the truth of their story in the editing process. Mm-hmm. So it's collaborative. It's just not nice and collaborative. You know, it's being able to take what you know to be true and tell the truth of that in a way that makes sense to other people. And I just don't think I understood any of that. I think it was like, oh, there's a story, you tell the story, people either like it or they don't. And I really do. I have a friend who is a writer and a journalist. And she said to me, I was in New Mexico at the time. I remember the phone call. She was like, look, you know, it takes a long time. And I was like, well, that's just for people who don't work hard. I work very hard. I'm going to get this done very quickly. And, you know, 2.5 years later, it takes a long time. And you can't need much like a baby, you can't need the book to do an emotional job for you. You have to do the emotional job and let the book go. And I listened to her and I was like, that sounds like mumble jumble, like, and if I could have that tattooed on my arm, like the book has already done its job. And when it goes out in the world, like we are free from each other, feels really, it doesn't mean my ego isn't in it, but I didn't understand that. And now that the book is done and I put all the words in the places as I meant them, I really do feel like be free, and may we meet each other on the road again. Like maybe you'll mean something different to me at a different time, but we are sort of done with each other, which I didn't understand. I just didn't, people said it to me. So I don't know that anyone who's listening to this will be like, now I'm the lady who said it, but the real, don't you find that to be true, Meg? That like you write it and then it's not really yours anymore.
Yep. I do.
Wow.
I do. It's great.
incredible. Yeah, because your readers are transforming it too, so it becomes a completely different creature through everyone's reading. I have a couple of quick questions. We can do this if y'all don't mind.
Yeah.
Okay, Megan with no age. Did you always know that this book would contain books within books, writing within writing?
That's a really good question. So I knew that Joan was going to write her own book. And for a long time, Joan, I only describe what she's writing.
Right.
And I just described the book and the chapters. And I gave those pages to my writing group and they read them and they came back and they were like, this is boring. We don't like these pages. And they said, show us what she's writing, like write it. And I was sort of like, no, please don't make me do that. Yeah, I can't do it. I was years into this and I knew that writing, a nested story is hard to, you're trying to hook readers with one book, and then you have to hook them with two. And some readers will automatically be turned off by that, and some will just not be hooked and not continue. And I didn't trust my skill level in writing in a slightly different Joan voice that was also in a romance voice that was different from my book that talked about romance. And I was scared. But I came back to my computer. I was very petulant. But I came back and I started, working on those chapters, and it was the best. I mean, it did a lot for me. It could be a tool that I could use to not steep my book in backstory, and I could give all these things about Samuel to this other character. And I realized I didn't need to write a ton. I didn't need to write a huge book. It just needed to be peppered throughout. And I ended up having a blast doing it. And I think I also gained some confidence from it. So, but it wasn't always there, but that's a great question. Thank you.
I want to say something about that because I was on a book thing with Lily King, who wrote Writers and Lovers, which has a same concept to it. And she spoke about how she deliberately, so in Lily King's book, the protagonist has written a book which goes to auction, and I won't ruin the story for people, but like it is supposed to be some kind of amazing story, and you only very vaguely have any idea what it might be about. And I found that so frustrating in the book. Like, in order for me to believe any of what's going on, except for her waitressing job, I need to know what she's writing. And Lily King said she had gotten very different feedback and really, really did not want to do that. And I just thought when I read yours, I was like, well, it can be done. And it was done as a mechanism of not looking back, but moving forward. She was writing her love story in this, Western cowboy belt buckle kind of way.
Right.
But part of the reason I love that section is that's what we do in grief work. In grief work, actually, we ask people, tell me the truth of your story. Now tell me your story as a story, because in order to move from the facts of the bad thing that happened, we need to activate the imagination again and like create and be engaged, re-engage in the active living relationship of loving that person. First we journal. In trauma work, you journal. I know, look how smart you were being.
I wish that I had met you before. I could have put that in.
Yeah, you journal this is what happened. This is the narrative that I have to carry. This is the truth of my life. And then you begin to shift that into, and that person is a part of my life even now. And when I reflect back on the story, more than the facts, how has it impacted me? So I just thought it was like, I don't know what the book would have been without it, but I thought it was genius and unbelievably well done. And the sign of like, an extraordinary writer who's like, well, I gave you one book. Now I'm going to give you another book inside a book. Yeah, that's not an easy feat. And you did it so beautifully.
Oh, thank you. That is so nice.
Can I ask you one more question? Is there another question there to ask?
Well, one quick one, which I think is so funny because Megan with no H, you mentioned worrying about what people are eating when you watch TV shows.
Yes.
I feel the same way. I'm watching Star Trek through, and like they have to eat the replicated food. I'm always fretting, like, how is that? How are they like not going crazy eating replicated food? But Anissa asked, what is your go-to writing snack? Your snack while writing?
Oh, good.
I love dark chocolate. I love chocolate and I love dark chocolate. And I bring chocolate to work every day. I have a studio down the street. And I always crack into it by like 9:30 in the morning, and then it's gone. And then my day is like, oh God.
That's good fuel. That's good fuel.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Megan with the H, what's your question? What's the next
I wanted to ask, and because I loved your characters so much, and I felt like every single one of them, I don't know, it felt like the Gilmore Girls or something, like a small town kind of setting with quirky characters. If you were going to pick one of them to write their backstory and to tell us about them, who would you pick out of everybody that's there? Who could you? I'm not going to make you commit to writing a book about them, but I'm just curious, like, do you have any unfinished business with any of those characters?
Another reader a few days ago gave me an incredible idea. And hi, Jean Steele, if you're out there, she said, I think you should write a book about Carmen, and it should be her responding to fan mail of her books for the last 34 years. And each book is like a letter, and you get her life in these letters, and you get all her Carmenisms and her craziness and her funniness and all her sadness and all these things pouring out as she responds to fan mail.
That sounds amazing. That is a great.
I was like, that's actually really brilliant. I don't know if I'll do it, but it was so brilliant. So I don't know, maybe that's in the works.
I mean, again, that's just another way of saying how readers engage
with
the people. And, I thought it was so interesting to have a character who died before we even met him. Like, we knew that there was a tragedy, and really what we know about that relationship is how it made Joan feel. We don't really know a ton about that person. And I just thought that was such a gorgeous choice. And it made me really curious about what kind of a backstory, other than being someone's great 6 months of the best, most infatuated love. Like, what would it be like to be a real person and learn about him as a person?
I know. And I didn't want to do too much of that, like, it's such a bummer to also like invest in someone as a reader who has died. And so I didn't want to do that to readers. I don't love when that happens to me. And I give a bit of a backstory. They're meeting in the massage school, but I wanted to be really careful because I think that could turn people off. It turns me off. And so then I wanted to give the things he loves, his tea kettle, his sweatshirt, his things like that, to Cord, the fictional cowboy, and give those to him in his sort of, real life as he rides off to Colorado. So
the other thing that's so fun about that meta story is that it's over the top in the way that those romance stories often are. And that, imagine, must have been fun as a writer to get to be like stereotypical, even with the names, like ridiculous and over the top.
Yeah, it was fun. And but I also knew for diehard romance readers, I wasn't hitting all the beats of a romance novel. And as I was studying them, I was like, okay, so I'm missing very key elements of a true romance. And people who are reading this are, might be like, oh, what the heck? And I was like, well, all right, this is for Joan and her editor to figure out. Like, it's not perfect.
Not actually romance novels.
So
good.
We are coming up on the hour, so our time is pretty much up. I have so many more questions. You're both so lovely. Thank you.
So fun.
What we'll do is, can you tell folks out there what the best way to follow you both so that they can find out, what's going on with you and hear about your forthcoming books?
Yeah. So I'm at Meg Tady on Instagram, Tady, and megantady.com. I have a lot of events coming up in New England and LA and Colorado. So I'm bopping around and would love to meet people.
I am Meghan Riordan Jarvis, and all of those names have extra letters. So the easiest thing to do is Google "Grief is my side hustle." Then you'll find I'm all over the place because I have this podcast. It will give you the correct spelling of my name. I'm most active on Instagram. And, if people have questions, I'm pretty responsive to DMs. And I have lots of things going on. I work as a trauma therapist. I do groups for people who are new to grief and loss. I work inside companies, and I have a writing process group where people are writing through trauma. And End of the Hour is coming out December 5th. And you can pre-order it on Amazon. The cover is there, which cracks my kids up because there is no actual book yet. And the Essential Questions on Grief and Loss is going to be out 2024. That is what I am supposed to be working on right now. I swear I am, but it's slow going. It's slow going.
You can pre-order from Warwick's too.
Absolutely. I shouldn't have said pre-order from Amazon. I just meant it's up there. Like, you can see the picture when you go onto a website. It's like, oh my gosh, my book is up there, even though there is no actual book yet. Please pre-order from your local bookstores, please.
I'm going to put the link into the chat here for that as well. Thank you both so much. This was great. This was
Thank you
excellent.
For having us.
Yes.
Oh, absolutely. This was you just hosted a girlfriend chat. So this thank you for letting us do this.
Super good stuff. Thank you both. Congratulations on all your stuff going on, and
thank you.
Go forth and be awesome.
Yes.
Thank you everybody for tuning in.
Yeah.
Take care.
Bye. Bye.